Hi and welcome to episode 34 of Beating BDD, a podcast about body dysmorphic disorder from the BDD Foundation. In this episode, Gem Ponting shares her experience of an important topic we haven't talked about much before, which is the impact cosmetic surgery can have on the condition. As you can imagine, some listeners may find aspects of our conversation upsetting, but there's also a lot to give you hope in Gem's story, not least the power of self-compassion and forgiveness in the healing process. Just before we get started, this podcast is funded as a result of the Big Give campaign. Thank you to our champion sponsor Jack, or Just Ask a Question, and our community sponsors Ori UK, the Nightingale Hospital and Blonde's Fine Art. You'll find more information on our sponsors in our show notes. Now over to Gem. Hi Gem, thank you so much for joining us on Beating BDD. How are you today?
Oh, no, thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm doing well, thank you.
Good. So I wanted to start by asking about something that you mentioned when we had a sort of pre-recording chat, which was that one of the ways in which you manage your BDD today is through acts of what you call quiet rebellion, which I love. Can you give us an example of what you mean by that?
Yeah, of course. I feel like that's a nice question to start on, actually. So it's what I refer to as this like doing it anyway approach. And yeah, I guess I sometimes feel like it is a bit of a quiet rebellion to like BDD programming and disobeying what my brain has done for so many years, and kind of trying to show up anyway, I guess. So it's times where, and this still happens at times now, where my BDD brain is sort of telling me not to go to a social event because I don't look right, or telling me that I won't enjoy something as much until I improve my appearance in some way, or sometimes it's in the form of like being rubbish at my job and I should quit. You know, those real BDD thoughts. Or sometimes it's when I'm having like more of a dip or a lapse, and it feels hard to kind of just do day-to-day things, like even walking the dog. And then I try and do it anyway. It sounds really simple now I'm saying it out loud, but I try and do it anyway. And it doesn't always mean that I go and do the thing and feel great doing it. But I feel like, I hope in the long term, it's sort of telling my brain that I'm allowed and I'm worthy of doing those things and enjoying life and have like the strength and resilience to keep going on difficult days, I guess. So yeah, and I feel like it does have this sort of overall healing effect where I'm slowly able to do more and more with life because I'm trying to sort of prove that voice wrong and disobey it. And it's through like action, I guess, through the doing, which is often where we see a lot of the healing. So
yeah, you reminded me actually, you know that book Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. So
yeah, I read that.
It is that really, isn't it? Because we're afraid of what judgment we might meet or whatever, and so our brains are sort of in a weird way trying to protect us, aren't they? So actually, you're exposing yourself to sort of worrying, potentially what your brain is telling you is dangerous situations or worrying situations, and you're learning little bit by bit that actually nothing bad is going to happen. So actually, it seems sort of part of that same mechanism, that feel the fear mechanism, doesn't it?
Yeah, totally. It's exactly that. And like I said, it's not an immediate effect, you know, unfortunately. But I think over time, and I guess I feel I should probably also say that this is more of like a recovery maintenance thing. I know it's not always that straightforward when you're in like those earlier stages of recovery to just kind of go out there and do it. And it's obviously important to tackle those things with support and ideally like a BDD trained therapist. But yeah, that definitely is something that helps me kind of maintain, I guess, and keep going and trying. Doesn't always happen, but yeah, just trying to kind of do the things and hope for that more long-term outcome of it.
Absolutely. So how would you describe where you are now with your recovery?
Well, I guess like I was kind of alluding to then, I would consider myself like in recovery, like like a maintenance phase, I guess. So life feels a lot more fulfilling now than it did before, and I can do a lot more of the things that I sort of enjoy and feel important, and see it as something that I will have to keep working on. But I would say I'm also much quicker to kind of know to sort of notice when something is a BDD thought or feeling. And that, I guess that feels quite different being in like a maintenance phase of recovery. And that distress can still be really high when when those thoughts and feelings come, but it doesn't feel as urgent. I think BDD makes it feel like your appearance is like an emergency or it's like an urgent thing to be fixed. But I think, yeah, I feel better able to manage that. So definitely like a lifelong journey, but I guess feeling a bit more in the driving seat now.
Yeah, and that's an important shift to make, isn't it? To feel
Yeah.
that you're in control or more in control than you have been.
Yeah.
So, are you okay then to go back to the beginning of your sort of BDD story and tell us when your BDD came on and what you think might have triggered it?
Yeah. So I actually showed signs of BDD from really young, about 8 or 9. And interestingly, it was focused on my hair at that point, which it's not now. But yeah, I used to ask for like a certain hairstyle from my mum in the morning before school, and then some days I'd just be really distressed because it wasn't right, like that feeling of it not being right, and I couldn't go to school. And then there was a few other behaviours like linked to my hair as well, with like this real need to control it in some way. And there was some teasing at school and stuff like that as well. But things didn't really come to a head then. It wasn't actually until after university when I started living on my own that things became much worse. I think that's a little bit later than typical, than like
Yeah.
most people, for it to sort of really come out in full force. But that's how it happened for me. And it's hard to pinpoint an exact trigger, but I think it was a combination of lots of different things and life events, which I don't think we'd have time to sort of delve into all of them now. But one of them was that I had a really serious horse riding accident when I was about 14. And I do feel that that probably added to my chances of like developing BDD, as I had a big trauma to my face. It took a long time to heal, but it was also at an age where it was like real pivotal age, like going through puberty. And I remember my school friends and just peers at school were like quite visibly shocked when they saw my face and when I went back to school. So yeah, I feel like that probably pushed me to be more focused on my face. And like, it's hard to say for sure, isn't it? Like I said, I do think it's a combination of things, but I think that probably increased my chance of developing like a more like obsessive or more like serious preoccupation. Because I also broke my leg at the time, but it was my face that was the most traumatic. That was what I
Yeah.
sort of really struggled to cope with. So yeah, there was a range of other things as well, but I feel like maybe they're worth mentioning as like quite significant things.
Yeah, I mean, I guess with the hair at a young age sort of is an early sign of sort of quite a bit of perfectionism, isn't it? As well as perfectionism focused on appearance. I guess there's that early sign, and then
Yeah.
this is obviously another factor that would have quite naturally at that age, I think, had an impact. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you said that then it really did become worse or come out in full force after you left university. So how did it affect you then at that point?
When things were like really bad, when it was sort of like mostly impacting me, and I guess this was before I knew about BDD, like before I knew what BDD was, I really had to sort of convince myself that that was just how I'd have to go through life. Like that, it felt like a very miserable existence, and I feel like the thoughts were so relentless. Yeah, I felt constantly sort of exhausted by the thoughts and safety behaviours that I was carrying out day to day. And yeah, just as I'm sure is the case with everyone with BDD, felt a lot of shame. And I think there was a period as well where it felt really hard to say anything to anyone because I obviously didn't want to draw attention to the concern. But I don't know, I felt like when I thought about saying it out loud, it felt really minimal. Like it was hard to kind of get across how much it was impacting me, like how severe it had become, I guess. But yeah, day-to-day life was pretty awful. It was all I could think about. It made me highly anxious trying to do anything socially. I started having panic attacks at work, but I couldn't really explain like why, or didn't yet feel sort of comfortable sharing what the source of that was. I don't think I really understood it myself properly yet either. Like I didn't have a label for it. So I was having panic attacks and I was typical BDD behaviors really, like mirror checking, like a small mirror to sort of try and see my face at various angles, taking photos from different angles, lots of suicidal thoughts. And then like a big coping mechanism I had was just like spending hours and hours researching how to fix things and surgeries. And I guess it felt like soothing to do, but it was also fueling the BDD further. I guess I didn't realize that at the time. It almost felt like I could try and soothe myself with that real solution mindset, I guess. I thought it was a solution. And I would touch my area of fixation a lot with my hands and fingers and become like really distressed at how bumpy and inconsistent the textures were. Yeah, just really, really miserable. I couldn't really see a life where I would be free from any of that distress. But yeah, I guess it is sometimes hard to sort of think about how bad those feelings became, which is a good thing, I guess, to be not in that headspace anymore. But when I reconnect with those feelings as well, it does really spur me on to like want to help others. And yeah, I know there's a lot of people feeling like that right now, if not worse, and struggling to get the help they need and deserve. I don't know, it's really isolating, isn't it, when you're in that place? You don't know what it is yet, and you don't know that there's help for it either. It's pretty miserable.
Yeah, just so hard keeping going. When would you say that your BDD peaked then, and why?
Yeah, so things got especially bad when I decided to have rhinoplasty surgery. I do find this topic really hard to sort of speak on, I guess, because I hate to say this, but I do still feel some shame about it. Like I still feel this like rush of shame come over me when I share about it. But yeah, I know that there's likely people listening who have had surgery and in that sort of initial period of recovery, and it's really tough getting through that. It was pretty soul destroying for me. Like the regret and the shame that I felt was really painful. And yeah, I guess the fallout for me was just really bad. Like it didn't help, and I didn't cope very well. I felt like it was just immediately a big mistake. And then I guess things really deteriorated from there. And it was after that point that I got diagnosed. But I think what I hadn't realised at the time, because I still didn't know like what BDD was, I can see now that even wanting the surgery was like a symptom of BDD. But yeah, I didn't know that at the time, and I just thought I could fix it with a physical solution, and maybe that would like take away or alleviate some of the feelings that I was having. Yeah.
So how and when did you get diagnosed?
So I actually remember Googling way before I was diagnosed something about how I felt about myself when things were really bad. But I dismissed it because I didn't think that my flaw was perceived, as lots of people feel. It felt very real. So I didn't really relate to that description of BDD. And yeah, I guess I didn't sort of explore it further because I was like, oh, that's not me. But then it was actually my sister in the end, I think, that encouraged me to seek help. I think I opened up to her a bit. And interestingly, even though I was living alone, like I wasn't living with my family at the time, I think they just kind of knew something wasn't right. Like I guess you can just sense in someone when you do see them that someone's not themselves, or like things different. So they supported me to sort of explore a diagnosis. And then I was diagnosed by Professor David Veal, and then he referred to me to a therapist in Manchester called David Knight. And yeah, he was a great CBT therapist for me. He is a great CBT therapist. But yeah, that was the journey. And I guess pretty straightforward, really, all things considered. I know that is not the journey for a lot of people, and there's way too many people who really struggle to access diagnosis and then therefore treatment. So yeah, I feel very fortunate that I was able to have that diagnosis, that private diagnosis, and I feel that diagnosis really does open the doors to then get the appropriate treatment. So yeah, like I said, quite straightforward, really. It's just getting to that point where I would accept that maybe it was BDD, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. And then how did the treatment itself go? I mean, did you start to recognise, that it was a psychiatric condition?
Yeah. So it was CBT, and I did some EMDR around like the trauma of the accident. But yeah, I think because it was specifically CBT for BDD, there was the usual psychoeducation piece, where it's really like understanding BDD, understanding how it operates and how it kind of, I guess how it manifested, like going a little bit into my history and potential causes, but then like how does that cycle continue to be fueled? Like there was a lot of, not a lot of actually, but there was a decent chunk on that. And I think that part of CBT is really important because obviously exposure, like the ERP stuff is important too, but it really helps to kind of see it for what it is, I guess. So yeah, I made some really fantastic progress, and I got to a point where I kind of felt like I was functioning again day to day. I started dating. I was able to sort of push myself a bit more and start to enjoy life a bit more. And it was effective treatment. But then I fell into a bit of a BDD trap, I think, where I was expecting my thoughts about the feature that I was concerned about to be improved as well, because my behaviors, or so I guess safety behaviors and stuff, had reduced, but that wasn't the case. I know now that kind of comes later. Like there's other complementary work to CBT that's helped with that kind of perception piece, or like acceptance. But at the time I thought, well, I've done the CBT stuff, my behaviors have reduced, I'm living like more of a normal life day to day, so maybe like I don't have BDD anymore, maybe I can go and try and fix things physically again, because I still had these negative thoughts about my appearance. So yeah, I guess I was like, maybe I can have both. I can do the therapy and I can try and fix things physically. And it was at that point where, well, it was 3 years after my first surgery and after making some really big steps in recovery, I made the decision to have another one. So yeah, it was like this really effective treatment, did really well, felt like I was back to sort of normal-ish functioning, but there was still this desire to change things physically, unfortunately.
Well, I think calling it a trap is a really good way. A BDD trap is a really good way of describing it. I think it probably is quite a classic pattern, isn't it, with BDD, that you do, that it cons you, lulls you into a false sense of security, and then comes back, basically.
And it's so convincing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like when it starts to creep in again, it's not always easy straight away to go, oh, that's BDD. I guess because those thought patterns are so ingrained, when they start to sort of creep back in, it's really hard to sort of distinguish what's BDD and what's, what I just want for myself.
And also surgery is normalised now, so it's easy to tell yourself this is just normal. Other people who are dissatisfied do this,
Yeah.
and it's fine.
Yeah. And especially once you start, from my experience anyway, once I started to research surgeries and some of the kind of communities I was starting to exist within like the online surgery world, really normalized it. And I seeing other people's stories and outcomes, and I was like, okay, it's going to be fine. Like I was only really seeing the good stuff. So that really sort of hooked me in as well, I guess.
And I guess how soon after that second surgery did you realize, gosh, I'm relapsing. This has not had the desired outcome.
Yeah, honestly, like immediately. So I actually went to Istanbul for my second surgery against the advice, and just I guess all of my loved ones were very much against that idea. But I was absolutely adamant. So I went there by myself, which now when I look back, I'm like, my goodness, BDD really had come back in the driving seat. I think I'd really started slipping, I guess, from all the stuff that I'd learned from that first round of treatment, because this was like 3 years on as well. So I guess there was like the period of doing better and then slipping back into these thoughts. So it was almost immediate. Like I honestly, before I'd even like had the cast off, because what I could see prior to having the cast off, I already wasn't happy with. And yeah, it feels pretty crazy to share this. I've not really shared this with many people, but I spiraled like almost immediately, and my partner knew the risks of he was really against me going anyway. He did everything he could to try and convince me out of it. he actually said that he thinks the only way he would have been able to stop me would be to burn my passport. So I was that adamant that I was just like, no, I just need to do this and then I'll be fine. But yeah, he knew straight away. He flew out like the next day and came to be with me because I think that he knew the risks of, he'd read a lot of the stats around BDD and sadly, the very high suicide rate. And I think he was, worried about me being on my own out there. So it was from that point really, like even that period of time that I was there in Istanbul recovering, like coming home, like I knew it was a really long journey ahead. And I think it was actually worse the second time round because I had the BDD diagnosis at that point. So I knew the guidance was to not engage with surgery and I did it anyway. So there was a lot of like self-hate and blame and regret that was, really hard to work through. Yeah, so in answer to your question, it was pretty much already immediate straight away.
How did you then work through that very, very, very difficult time? What did you do?
I guess it's a combination of things. For a little while, honestly, nothing like that. Like I was just really wallowing in that decision that I'd made, and that was like the period where I like really strongly considered ending my life. It got really, really, but I really sort of hit my rock bottom. But then there was lots of things that came about from that relapse that I didn't have before and actually meant that I made more of a recovery from the relapse than the first time around. So I guess if there's absolutely any silver linings, maybe that's one of them. But it was actually after my relapse that I really took support from the BDD Foundation. So that's when I eventually, once I decided I was going to, try again and try and get better, that's when I discovered the support groups, and I did a retreat day. I attended the 2019 conference. I saw your stall there, actually. It was very surreal to be chatting on the podcast because I remember seeing your stall and thinking like, God, that feels absurd to say that stuff out loud for me, not for anyone else.
Well, there you go. That's a sign of the progress you've made, isn't it?
Yeah. No, but I listened to all the episodes when I was unwell. I think you were maybe just starting up then. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that was the very beginning.
Yeah. So I guess that was the first time I found any kind of like connection, and that gave me hope. Like I'd never really felt that hope before, and also just not feeling alone. I felt like I'd found my people and this team of people who really got it and really, really genuinely wanted to help. And don't get me wrong, my loved ones really did want to help as well. Like they did all they could once they realised it was BDD and once they realised I was in a really bad relapse. But unfortunately for them, I would always listen and trust someone who was in recovery from BDD more than when they tried to encourage me. It must be so frustrating for family and friends. Like, this is what I've been telling you for like months, and now someone with BDD says it, and
now it's true.
Yeah, it makes such a difference. But that lived experience is so powerful, isn't it? Like, it really gave me the hope and motivation that like maybe I could get better, and maybe there was like hope for recovery again. But I also did re-engage with therapy. I didn't straight away because I really wasn't ready, and I was really for a while in that state of like just wanting someone to do it for me. Like I felt so exhausted, or like I just wanted someone to tell me that another surgery would make it better. I was like adamant that I was just going to get another surgery and that we could just fix this one part that wasn't right. Neither of those things were going to happen, but I did eventually re-engage with therapy again. And also I became like kind of obsessed with getting better. Like eventually, once I did re-engage with like that recovery journey, it sounds really self-centered, but like everything I did was through this like lens of BDD recovery, and it made me feel like I was taking some control. I became like really focused on this idea of, I might have read it in a book or something, like I might have taken inspiration, I can't remember now, but like this idea of being responsible for my own recovery, which maybe sounds like a bit harsh on yourself, but it actually feels like self-compassion. It feels like it's part of the self-compassion piece. Like it was this feeling of realizing that it's like within my power, with obviously with the right support and guidance, which I guess you might feel like, oh, that's kind of terrifying. But I also think it's quite empowering once I moved into that mindset to be like, I got a little work to do, but it's actually all within me with the right support and treatment to do
Yeah.
it. Like I am the one that can do that. So I kind of became like a bit obsessed with that mindset. And I used to have this little notebook where this was at the same time that I'd re-engaged in treatment, but I used to have this notebook where every morning I'd write down like 3 aims for the day. Sometimes they were like really small steps because they needed to be, or sometimes they were like like exposure exercises. And then at the end of the day, I'd write down 3 things that I was grateful for. I've still got the book now, like it's quite emotional to read through it, but it really helped me feel like I was in control of my progress. And eventually I could like look back and notice, oh, there was like changes in how I felt. And it felt tangible because I could be like, oh, I did the thing. I can see that I wrote down. That's what I was choosing to do. And then I'm slowly, very slowly starting to feel the impact of that. Like I am starting to feel better. So I became a bit obsessed with that. I guess that, like we have obsessive personalities, don't we, with BDD? So that's like where I push my obsession. But I also just wanted to mention as well, the like forgiveness for myself has been a really big part of it for me. Like I haven't been able to move past regret. Like I think I will always wish that I hadn't had surgery, but I really do feel that, and I think this is the case for so many people with BDD who go down like cosmetic surgery or cosmetic treatments route. I really feel now that I was just acting in my own best interests. Like I was trying to alleviate my distress and suffering. And it felt like this genuine solution I had to find the outcome of. Like I had to find out if it would help. So yeah, that's something that I'm still working on, that like forgiveness for myself. But yeah, I guess it ties into like that self-compassion and self-acceptance piece. And that feels like a really important part of my recovery. And I guess, yeah, how I've sort of come to this point now.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think, you go into these things thinking, like you say, you're trying to alleviate your distress, but you don't know yourself. You genuinely don't know that how it's going to turn out and how you're going to feel afterwards. And you really feel like you're doing it for the best. And it's a really good way to look at it, I think, that you can't beat yourself up for that because you really were trying to save yourself, really, weren't you, in a way?
Yeah. And I think that goes to any kind of like cosmetic treatment.
Mm.
I know it often will feed into this cycle of more treatments or trying to
Yeah.
fix something that didn't go how planned, but it is always with like that wish to just reduce the distress.
Yeah, absolutely. So how would you describe life, what life is like for you today? What makes you happy?
Yeah, life's so much better than I thought it would ever be. There's a lot more joy in my life. I'm in a loving relationship. I have a little sausage dog who I love dearly. I'm an auntie, do yoga and running and ceramics. I love me a hobby. um, and yeah, I have a small circle of wonderful friends. I feel, yeah, recovery has been really worth it. I feel like it's, a humble little life, but that is all I ever really wanted, to just have like a bit more peace and not be sort of so plagued by um BDD thoughts. And I also have a lot more like brain space than I used to, I think, like more emotional availability and energy to give to other people. And sort of that, I guess, yeah, like I said at the start when I was talking about that sort of ongoing journey of recovery, like it feels possible to like engage in the things that I enjoy and actually be present. That felt so impossible. Like I think that when those BDD thoughts are just so constant and relentless, that literally feels like that's never going to happen, doesn't it? So yeah, I feel very grateful for how things are now. So something else I guess that's different about life now is that I am also working at the BDD Foundation, which is a real privilege. So obviously I was a service user, and then later became a volunteer for something called the Overcoming BDD program, and now work as a project manager for the charity. So yeah, it's a real privilege, and I think it also helps keep me really accountable. There's a lot of really busy periods where it's like really easy to get like caught up in the stress of everything day to day, but the work that I do, sort of trying to support and engage people who are, really mentally unwell with BDD, it's really close to my heart, and I care really deeply about this work, and I think I often get to witness like the progress that people make on one of the projects, the Overcoming BDD program, and it kind of makes all that like stress of day to day and like the busyness of things really worth it. Yeah, like many people just take really sort of heartwarming steps in their recovery journey, and the fulfillment from that is really huge. And I think, there's the accountability piece, but there's also that like real supportive piece. I feel very lucky to be working alongside people who really get BDD. I know that's often not the case in workplaces. And yeah, it can feel a really difficult thing to talk about, I guess, in the workplace. But I'm surrounded by people that talk about it all the time, which is
Yeah.
it's really refreshing. I think sometimes the work can be heavy, but sometimes it's really refreshing to be in that environment.
Yeah.
So yeah, I get to work alongside some really wonderful people, really kind of compassionate and dedicated people, who also really care deeply. So I feel very lucky to
Yeah,
sort of be involved in that way as well. And yeah, I guess
absolutely.
that's now a big part of my life too, because it's my job. So, and this happens a lot with volunteers and members of staff as well. Even though we're very small, there's not many of us, but it's like a really nice sort of circle that we see often, where people will, be service users and take support from the foundation, and then, later on in their recovery journey, volunteer with us or
Mm.
work with us. And yeah, I just think that's a really beautiful thing to be part of and to connect with people in that way as well. So yeah, that's a big part of what's
That's a massive plus. Yeah, I can really see why
yeah.
that would be so rewarding.
Yeah.
Um, so you talked about the self-forgiveness being really important and these amazing acts of quiet rebellion. Is there anything else that you do in particular to keep yourself well?
So I guess usual things like attention refocusing techniques, as lots of other people have mentioned on here. I also find yoga really, really healing. And I also think, like, having experience from recovery, I don't know how to word that better, but like gaining
Mm.
experience through recovery, I guess what I mean is like every time BDD sort of gets loud or catches me out, I feel like I gain more experience to navigate it. And then each time I work through that like relapse or dip, I'm more equipped for next time, if that makes sense. So I don't know if that really answers the question about how I keep myself well, but like, yeah, I guess sort of trusting in that and knowing that we're always sort of like learning and growing from whatever that was to kind of be better, to be more healed down the line.
Absolutely.
Um, and yeah, I don't know if this is quite similar to the quiet rebellion thing, but there's a quote that I recently discovered in a book that I was reading that says that life shrinks or grows in proportion to one's courage. And I
Mm.
really love, like, I'm obsessed with this idea. I find it a bit like I was saying earlier, I find it quite empowering that, like, these small steps or like the decision to do something differently. Because I don't like courage isn't always this big and loud thing. It's often those like little small moments and decisions to like choose a different option or try a different approach, like working on recovery for our future selves, I guess. So that like taking action piece
Yeah.
of like doing those small little things that maybe don't actually seem big and important, like I don't know, doing the behavioral experiment that we
Mm.
agreed with our therapist, or like going to the early morning yoga class because we know it helps our brains, or like expressing our wants and needs. There's a long time I did, like, how often do we just forget to do that? Do you know what I mean? So like just
Right.
those little things where we're like showing up for ourselves. Yeah, I feel that's like really a really important piece to the puzzle for me. And they
It
might
is.
like, to an outsider, I think they might just seem like normal day-to-day things, but when you have BDD,
Yeah.
like some of those things feel like really big and difficult. So yeah, I guess it's like
Mm.
this idea of chipping away at things, like these small steps towards a different and like more recovered like future self, I guess.
Yes. How do you feel now when you look back at the person that you were, the person who went to Istanbul, for example? I mean, how does that feel to you to look back on that person?
I guess I feel relieved that things don't feel
Mm.
that distressing and overwhelming anymore. But I also would like to give me a cuddle, like that passed me a cuddle.
Mm.
Like yeah, it was really rough. I didn't necessarily think that I would come out of it at that point after the second surgery. So yeah, I think just mostly relief and yeah, like that hope, I guess, that things can be better. They
Mm.
can become better.
Yeah. You may feel we've already covered this, but what would you say is the biggest lesson that you've learned from your experiences with BDD?
I feel like it's probably around that like forgiveness and self-compassion piece. But also this like idea that there's like a difference in the way that my brain works, which impacts how I see myself. And that's something that we can sort of work to rewire. So yeah, I guess both those things. I find that like quite a reassuring thought sometimes to understand it in that way and sort of know that like it's a condition that affects sort of like my way of thinking, how my brain operates.
Mm.
There's some really interesting research around it actually. One of the clinicians that spoke at the BDD Foundation conference of like this difference in brain processing and like visual processing kind of distortions. So yeah, I find that really interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think self-compassion, I think that's become like a really important part of recovery. I used to think it was like this nice little add-on, like a little cherry on top of the cake.
Yeah.
But I think it's it's just a lot harder to recover if we're berating ourselves while we're trying to do so. You know, it's like
Yeah.
so much harder. There's that quote that's like, you can't hate yourself into recovery. And I love that because I think like so often that BDD voice comes in, that perfectionist voice and that BDD voice comes in as well around like being good at recovering. It's like, it's so unfair. It's everywhere. Like, am I being good enough at getting better? There's that pressure and a whole new pressure of something to be better at or to fail at. So yeah, I think the self-compassion piece is just so important because it's very hard to move forward while we're being like really unkind to ourselves.
Yeah, so true. So finally, what would you say to listeners who are really struggling with their BDD?
It's such a big question, but I think I would say that your current and future self are deserving and worthy of like so much more than BDD will convince you of, and that the thoughts, like I know that the thoughts and feelings BDD brings feel very real, but to try and trust that kind of other way of thinking, like trust that they're not true. And also just, I know it's quite simple, but that there's help out there. There's a really big community of us who are living with BDD, you know, recovering from BDD, supporting others on that, you know, on that journey. So please don't feel you have to go it alone. Because there's lots of support out there.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much, Gem. That was really, really interesting and very articulate and moving. So I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.
Oh, thank you so much, Claire. No, thank you for having me.
You're really welcome. Thanks again to Gem for putting her BDD story out there to help others. We understand both what it takes to do that and the value it brings to people struggling with the disorder. For more episodes, search for Beating BDD on major podcast apps and on Spotify. You can also leave us feedback by following the BDD Foundation on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube and Facebook. I'll be back with another interview soon. Until then, remember that this podcast isn't therapy, so please do seek help from a trained professional.